long time since I've done a political video, which you might find a bit surprising because it is the middle of an American election year, but all the choices are so utterly reprehensible it's really kind of hard to pick any of them to attack without having to attack them all. But I came across this story and I just had to say something about it because it demonstrates, once again, how utterly ridiculous and bankrupt the whole libertarian philosophy is, as if that surprises anyone but the most ardent, self-proclaimed libertarians. So let's see what happens when somebody tries to invent a magical, mystical libertarian homeland, shall we? So the headline reads, Liberland, how one man plans to build a new libertarian paradise in Europe. Of course, nobody in Europe granted him the power, or authority, or permission to actually do such a thing. He just decided that he wanted a piece of land that didn't belong to him, so he claims it's his, and has started constructing his dream society, in his head, mind you, because the two militaries fighting over that particular patch of bog won't actually let anyone step foot on it. But it's libertarianism. You can't expect rationality or intelligence, can you? When he plunged a flag into the banks of the Danube and declared the birth of the Free Republic of Liberland, Vitjelika was dismissed by governments and media organizations as a joke. Okay, yes, I probably slaughtered his name. Sue me. But at least governments and media organizations had the right idea. It is a ridiculous idea by people who hold to a ridiculous ideology, but we'll see why in just a minute. Liberland lies on the Croatia-Serbia border, roughly halfway between Zagreb and Belgrade. A product of a border dispute between the two countries lasting a quarter of a century. It lies on a portion of territory which neither country is willing to claim. Well, what does that mean? It means that the land that our libertarian friend here is trying to claim is already claimed by both Croatia and Serbia. It is, for all intents and purposes, already owned land. In fact, there are two countries that have been fighting over it for the past 25 years. It isn't free land for anyone who wants it to claim. This isn't how you go about making a new country, except in the pea-brains of libertarians. They made it a no-man's land, Mr. Jedlicka says after giving a speech at the Institute of Economic Affairs in London to a receptive audience of bankers, free marketeers, and young conservatives. No, they didn't make it a no-man's land, you idiot. They made it a contested land. Two countries claim it as their own. That doesn't give you the right to just move in and take over. Only a complete moron thinks that. In fact, in the next paragraph, it says, in the years since Liberland was founded, on April 13th, Thomas Jefferson's birthday, Croatia has set up police patrols and arrested dozens of people for attempting to access the unexpectedly hotly disputed territory. Yeah, it's called trespassing. You morons are trespassing. You can no more move into somebody else's property and set up your own country than you can move into my closet without my permission and declare it your own personal little fiefdom. It doesn't work that way. While he could not access what he sees as his own land, Mr. Jedlicka was very busy meeting sympathetic politicians around the world and setting up a website where people fed up with their own governments could register their interest in the venture and donate to the cause. Meaning, he's scamming the credulous, which describes a lot of libertarians. He can see the land as his all he wants, but until the international community recognizes this ridiculous Liberland as a legitimate country, that means nothing. And nobody's going to recognize it as a legitimate country when it sits on land that is contested by two other already legitimate countries that have been fighting over it for a quarter of a century. The whole basis of this claim is theft. And that's something libertarians should support, right? Ever the optimist, Mr. Jedlicka says, it was a good thing that Croatia shut the border. And this is a sentiment echoed by a lot of libertarians I've talked to about this story. In fact, they consider the Croatian and Serbian armies to be their security forces because they think that so long as this border dispute is going on, they won't allow any foreign armies in to disrupt their libertarian paradise. You know, that paradise that they're not allowed to live on because it's somebody else's land and they don't actually own it? That paradise? That's all about to change, however. This weekend, Mr. Liberland and his volunteer ministers held a conference to discuss Liberland's future at a Croatian hotel just 5 kilometers from the border. And in the summer, he plans to stage a state celebration in a field next to the disputed territory which, if all goes to plan, could snowball into something much more. Notice how they're not actually meeting in Liberland, right? Nobody will give them access to this bog that they wish was a country. But their plans are not going to be successful. They only demonstrate how delusional these people actually are. It's going to be a big media event, he says. We would like to invite 5,000 people with the best artists who support Liberland attending, and we already have 2 or 3 major festival organizers in the area helping us. That could be the time when we actually take over control of this territory, he says, with a clear sense of anticipation. We're not pushing for it yet, but there's no way you can stop 5,000 people taking over control of Liberland. Yeah, they can. Since there are 2 actual armies sitting on the border with machine guns and tanks and rockets, they can stop 5,000 self-entitled libertarian assholes quite easily, in fact. Those people probably won't be coming back. But hey, no loss to the world, right? Asked if he is essentially advocating a hostile takeover, Mr. Jedlicka insists that it would be better for Croatia to give the festival goers a green light for the move. 5,000 people trying to cross into a territory without legal permission is called an invasion. And that gives the armies of both Croatia and Serbia every legal, ethical, and moral right to open fire on the invaders should they be commanded to do so. The fact that the invaders aren't carrying any weapons is irrelevant. Their intent to invade and take over territory that doesn't belong to them makes such actions entirely acceptable. His vision for a haven, protected from government regulation and virtually free from all taxation, has caught the imagination of people from every corner of the globe. Not rational people, of course, but libertarians aren't exactly known for being rational or having a decent grasp of how things actually work in the real world. And this becomes really clear as we continue to look at how this group of libertarians think they're going to run their new country and why this whole thing is going to fall apart in a giant clusterfuck. Liberland will have just 5 laws, he says, with the state's only responsibilities surrounding justice, security, and diplomacy. Tax will be paid on a voluntary basis, with people free to smoke marijuana, drive as fast as they like, and own guns, all so long as they don't hurt anyone else. Yeah, so how are we going to fund things like the military and social services and all the stuff that nobody wants to pay for if taxation is voluntary? How long before they get a small group of people living the libertarian dream and the much larger group of people who have nothing but aren't being taken care of because nobody volunteers to hand out money, goods, and supplies? They're going to have riots, and since anyone can own guns, these riots are going to be bloody. But what about national defense? Right now they're relying on their proximity to Croatia and Serbia to keep other marauding armies from crossing their supposed borders. But Croatia and Serbia aren't exactly big military powerhouses themselves. If some big nation decides to come sweeping across Europe, as has happened at least a couple times in the past century or so, they're dead. They have no standing army because they have no way to actually pay for it. And let's talk about Croatia and Serbia for a moment. Maybe they might want that land back. How the fuck is Liberland going to stop them from just coming in and taking it? We are very much into building tax havens, or rather tax heavens, because there's already way too many tax hells on this planet, he says. We would like to be the front runners in technologies that make the classical role of state obsolete. And that's exactly why they would never be recognized as a nation, because any nation that exists to be a tax haven would cause havoc on the international stage. Even Switzerland, which used to be renowned for their Swiss bank accounts, was forced to change how they did business under pressure from the international economic community. Hiding money offshore is no longer as easy or accepted as it once was, and a country that would have to rely on such foreign investments as a means of staying solvent wouldn't be solvent for very long. But really, what other choices do they have? Selling beer? That's not a way to sustain a national economy, especially when they have to import almost all of their ingredients. There just isn't enough physical land available in this bog to make any kind of agricultural or industrial development possible. With no viable exports and requiring a ton of imports, the whole place is going to fall apart in days. There is no denying that the youngest country in the world would not still be around if it were not for Mr. Jedlicka's own likable nature and infectious determination. But it is not hard to get the impression that Liberland itself could end up being a somewhat heartless place to live. Well, it isn't a country because no nation on the planet recognizes them as such, and the UN doesn't take them seriously. So they're not the youngest country in the world. They're the newest wannabe country in the world, but who gives a shit about that? You can't just declare yourself to be a country and then magically become one. It just doesn't work that way. Any more than a kid with a cape can declare themselves Superman and actually fly. It takes more than determination to become a successful nation, and you don't start out by trying to steal someone else's land and then declaring yourself an illegal money laundering site for the world's criminals. Sure, that'll go over well with the rest of the international community, who you have to rely on because you have no actual defenses of your own. What's to stop some pissed off nation from just flying overhead and carpet bombing your little nation into the Stone Age? Not a damn thing. If you were an official nation, Croatia and Serbia wouldn't stop anyone, and honestly, they'd probably both be so pissed off at you that their own armies would join forces and roll right over your ass with the rest of the planet applauding. And this is exactly why libertarian politics are so stupid. Okay, I'm only going to focus on the most ridiculous, ludicrous versions of libertarianism, like the ones from magical Liberland. But it's hard to look at this and not see how ridiculously massive problems they have with their ideology. It just doesn't work, and anyone over the age of 12 knows it doesn't work. But that's the problem. The people who espouse this ideology act like they're 12 years old and playing a game. Do these people have no actual real-world experience? Well, probably not, looking at the so-called cabinet of Liberland. These are kids who just don't know any better, and who, like so many American college-age kids, would rather live in an emotionally comforted fantasy world than deal with actual reality as it is. Liberland isn't a legitimate country. Libertarianism isn't even a legitimate political ideology. It's just a fantasy by people who'd rather play make-believe than deal with the real world. And I can't say I'm all that surprised, are you?